All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, supporting entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. We are here today with Cheri Honeycutt. Welcome, Cheri.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here, Heather.
Oh my gosh, so good to see you. So I'll give the official introduction to Cheri here in a moment, but Cheri and I crossed paths, what was it? A year ago in May.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been a
Yeah,
little while and had a lovely, I can't even remember how many days it was.
4 or 5?
4 or 5 days. It was a good chunk of, yeah,
Yeah.
together at a retreat down in Arizona. And that was such a special time for me. I think back
Mhm.
on that experience. It was called The Journey to Stillness, and how I felt not only in the event, but coming home from the event.
Yeah.
Anyways, really transformational. And so Cheri and I crossed paths there. And Cheri, you were one of my absolute favorites. Like your energy, your
Mhm.
humor, the
Ah,
way that you see life. And I just
back at you,
really
girlfriend. Back at you.
I really loved our time together, so I'm super excited to have you here. For
Glad
those
to
of you, oh, thank you. And for those of you that don't know Cheri, Cheri is a coach, trainer, and facilitator for over 20 years. Let me try that again. Cheri has been a coach, trainer, and facilitator for over 20 years. She's a steadfast question asker, a gracious butt kicker, and a seer of possibility. She's
Mhm.
passionate about appreciating the dark and the light of life. She's a where the rubber meet the road visionary. And I'm just going to rewrite that for you. She's a where the rubber meets the road visionary who helps folks stop spinning out of control or getting lost in the weeds. It's her belief that we all can have the life or team or business we truly want when we purposefully choose our thoughts, purposefully use our feelings as guides, and purposefully take actions that align with what we desire. She likes to say it this way: you can live your ideal life when you live on purpose. Hallelujah. Welcome,
Hallelujah.
Cheri.
Thank you, Heather. That was a lot and typos to boot. You're welcome.
No, that's okay. This is why I have an editor, right? We get to re-say it and try it
Yeah.
again. So
Yeah. Okay, good.
no worries.
Good.
Well, it's so good to have you here.
Mhm.
It's a lot probably has happened in a year and a
Oh,
half since
yeah.
you and I have been together, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it has. Lots has happened. I think we were just barely coming out of the pandemic. We weren't even out of the pandemic. Do you
No,
remember?
we were
We all
smack in
went
the
through it,
middle.
but
Yeah.
we all bravely or silly, stupidly or whatever, we in the middle of the pandemic went on retreat. But the world has changed, man. We're
Mhm.
all different.
Yeah.
And there a recalibration and I'm right in there with most of the other people in the world going, wow, am I really doing what I want to be doing? How am I spending my
Mm,
time? Where do I want to be? All questions we had before, but I think they're on like 11 now.
yes.
We're
Yeah.
all up here going, asking the right questions about is this what we want?
Mhm.
So
Well, I was going to say, in your line of work, what have you seen during COVID and coming out of COVID? I'd be really
yeah.
curious what you're seeing with your clients.
What I'm seeing with my clients, I'm seeing, first of all, I do a lot of work in healthcare, and I saw a
Mm.
lot of folks obviously be burned out, but they left and are leaving. And so, folks who are working in healthcare are predicting a huge exits as
Mm,
people who could have left, and those who needed a little more time under their belt are leaving. Then
yeah.
I'm also seeing a whole lot of folks decide that I want my life to be configured in a different way. I want to live in a different city. I want to do my work life balance in a different way. I want
Mm,
my home environment to change, which is one of the things that I end up working with a lot of my clients with about their physical space. Well, you spend 2 years in your physical space, people now get, oh, my space matters.
mm,
So there are all these new awarenesses. There's stuff happening on the business end, but probably what I'm most struck by, Heather, is what it's done to individuals, or what it's broken open for some individuals,
mm.
and not necessarily smooth and beautiful and You're shaking your head, right? You know, it's like we get
Mm,
flayed wide open. And like my introduction said, I'm not particularly afraid of that stuff.
mhm.
That's where the good stuff is. That's the fertile ground for change. So
Mhm.
so I guess in some ways it's a coach's dream.
Yeah.
Lots of folks are more coachable than ever, more
Mm.
ready. Not everybody, you
Yeah.
know, they're that sort of, you know, there are a whole lot of folks who want to go right back to sleep, and that sounded judgy, but who were like, we'll do this little blip, but we won't go back to business as usual.
Right. The autopilot. I prefer to
Yeah,
be over here on autopilot. It's more
yeah, autopilot.
comfortable.
Yep, I
Mhm.
call it living by default, or they want to go back to the factory settings and not challenge it. But then I think there's a growing number of people who got knocked off their game and went, oh, and I survived. What else
Yeah.
could I do differently?
Yeah.
For that reason, Heather, it's an exciting time.
Right. I'm seeing friends like pick up and leave their home countries and move across the world. I'm seeing,
Yeah,
friends that have left like what they thought was their dream job, and
yeah.
just saying, nope, after these last 2 years, I'm
Nope,
done with that. I'm going to go
nope.
try something else.
I've got friends living in a camper going across the world. You know, I can work remotely. Let me live here for a while. Let me do here, you know, let me sell my stuff and downsize. Let me
Mm.
uh, just fill in the blank, right? We've all heard the stories. And then there's those of us who didn't make major changes, but I think there's internal sort of, what do they call those tectonic plates under the earth? You know, these
Mhm.
big things got shaken up. And folks are some are really rising to the occasion to reconfigure their life, like I call it, to designing their life
Mm.
intentionally,
Yes.
which is the goal.
Which is
Yeah.
the goal. Well, even that phrase, broken open.
Hmm.
One of my favorite books, it's by Elizabeth Lesser, is called Broken Open,
Broken
right?
open, it's right
It's
over there, it's
yes,
blue.
color coded. We were just talking about Cheri's. If you're not on video, Cheri is standing in front of a bookshelf that has all of the color coded books in the right order, yellow, orange, red, right? And I was laughing, asking her, "Do you have to remember the color of the book so you can find it?" Um, but it always looks great, right? It's one of those like, "Oh, is that a fake background or did you really do that?"
That's really mine, yeah.
I love it. And she said that she's got a closet to match.
But your book, you're right, Elizabeth Lesser, continued, you're right, it's a great
Yes,
book.
is a great book, and it is just such a great example of how the various ways that we break open
Mm.
change us and help us grow. And you even mentioning like it's not really like a beautiful process. I don't know anybody that has really truly broken open and felt like it was a graceful, easy
No,
process, right? That's not
no.
usually how breaking occurs.
It's not. It's messy, and it's the dark night of the soul. Some might even say, depends on
Mm.
how big, you know, how big you're broken open. I just finished rereading The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck, and talks about
Mhm.
really, you know, when life breaks you open, it really brings you to a new, it sets the tone a different way. Glennon Doyle, the same way. You'll hear these stories after stories, and I'll just share with you, I had a huge moment about 3 months ago where my life just broke open again in a very
Mm.
strange way. I hope it's okay to share, but I all of a sudden
Yes.
woke up one day and there was this huge, my face was swollen and I had to do a recording. And within days, I'm in the hospital with this huge face. And this is gross, listeners, but it was just full of pus. And there was this
Mm.
moment, and what happened, Heather, is I took that whole week and just said, my body's getting rid of stuff. I'm shifting inside and stuff has to shift. And there was this cathartic moment, both physically, and I tell you, and I decided, and people joked me, they said, don't you think it's just a big zit? No, I think it was a huge, big shift in my body as I'm
Mhm.
recalibrating to the new way to be. Or
Yeah.
which is the better story, right? I'm going with that story.
I
I'm
like
going
I
with that story.
I like that story. Well, it is so fascinating, this whole issue of like, the physical symptoms that we face, right?
Yes.
All of us have journeys in these physical bodies. And, So many of us can face trauma and
Mhm.
difficulty and challenges, dealing with the physical aspect of living. And I think everybody at some point faces their own healing journey in regards to their
They do.
physical self,
They
right?
do. And
Y-
and I think, I say I think they do, at least the folks in my orbit,
Mhm.
and what I've seen, and the reason I brought up that gross thing about me is that it's just rarely pretty. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's a physical thing that's full of pain. Sometimes it's an emotional pain that you would rather it be physical, because that can be
Mhm.
equally as hard. But on
Mhm.
the other side of those things, when you ride that wave, and I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but my own life experiences have said, if I lean into that darkness, I get through to the light much quicker than if I try to outrun the dark.
Mm.
And I've tried that, but it's just easier.
And when you
Look at
say
it.
right, yeah, well, it's the whole like what you resist persists, right? Or
Yes.
we try to avoid things, and by doing that, we make it a bigger
Mhm.
problem.
Okay.
Um, Share with me what it means to lean into the darkness.
Well, I guess it means two things. For first, if it's your tendency to run away, then it means just to stay there. So you might
Mm,
not even have to lean in if your MO is to really bolt or distract or go feed it or shop it or sex it or gamble it
mm,
or whatever that is, or do a spiritual bypass and
mhm,
say, other people have it worse, I'm fine. But to stay in that and name it and feel it, literally
mhm,
feel it.
yeah,
And I don't want to poo-poo this. That can be really hard for some folks. We're not all wired to take it. Our personalities are different.
yeah,
But in the feeling of it, um, I think some folks have to remember, and I say this a lot with my clients. This is a phrase, is that you have to remember that feelings aren't facts. Now, it's a fact you're having the feeling, but the feeling that, oh, I will be abandoned, or no one loves me, or I'm a piece of shit,
mm,
you know, it feels true, but it's not. But if you
right.
can sit in that and be curious, and I think that's the skill set that I've been really playing with the last year or two, Heather, is that the way you can lean in to the feeling is first feel it, but then bring into it a spirit of curiosity.
Mm,
Because Heather, try this. If you're truly curious, you can't be much of anything else,
mm,
right?
mm,
You go into a spooky, scary house in your neighborhood, and all of a sudden you're like, I've heard the horror stories, or there might be a dead body in there, whatever. If you're just curious, you're less scared.
yeah, it's
Does
hard to
that
hold
make
on to
sense?
the fear or the
Yeah.
anger or yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard all this stuff before, but I think it's worth repeating for listeners who've heard it, because those feelings can hijack us.
Mm,
But it's my personal experience, and of course my experience with clients, is that avoiding them doesn't really get you anywhere.
yeah.
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 Um,
Well, and I think modern life makes it so easy to avoid. We can go for years being distracted by children and jobs and, real life issues, real life
sure.
things that are keeping us occupied, but keep us from really truly waking up to the stuff that matters the most. I want to backtrack a little bit. How did you get into the line of work that you're doing?
Oh, so I started out in public health
Mm,
and got a master's in public health. And I did, and actually still have a branch of my company where I still do this, working in HIV in the 80s. So I did a lot of work in
mm,
sexuality education, did a lot of work in HIV in the 80s. And in fact, I still have another company called Whetstone Consultations, where I train healthcare folks. Do you hear my dog in the background? She's a bonus. She's a bonus. Um, where I train uh, educators, counselors, and doctors about how to do HIV. Can I move and
mm,
just go close that door real quick?
totally.
But then I discovered along the way, I did a lot of counseling. I did a lot of, I mean, I probably told 350 people they have HIV back in the 90s. I did a lot of partner notification out in the community, doing that kind of stuff. And then, so I did a lot of one-on-one work. And then I started doing training, teaching sexuality and education and training, and decided and noticed I loved that. And so then that moved into motivational speaking and moved into coaching and moved into, we just follow the breadcrumbs. Heather, I do
Yeah.
not have a straight path in my business.
Right. Well,
right
even
now.
even hearing your start, doing educating and service work around AIDS, like
Mhm.
talk about dark night of the soul and
Yeah.
right and facing, especially at that time,
Yeah. In the
facing
80s, it was terrifying for
it was
most.
like it was a death sentence
It
then.
was, and there was huge, still is, but the stigma around that
Mm.
time, and the lack of resources, and there was no medication. So
Yeah.
I dealt, I learned how to give how to give hard information. I learned how to have
Mhm.
hard conversations. I learned how to sit and be witness to someone's sadness and discomfort and
Mm.
feel it, but not take it on.
Oof, and that's a real skill as well. I think that's really
Yeah.
hard for a lot of people, especially those that really, tend to be quite empathetic.
Yeah, yeah, and
Mm.
you won't last long if you have to do
Mm-mm,
that,
mm-mm.
so, but that skill is transferable. Not only it helped me as a parent. It helped me as a parent when my kid would mess up and, fall and hurt themselves or lose something, and I could just sit there and I know that must be
Mhm.
hard. Because
Mm.
that's life, and not something as drastic as being diagnosed with something that's fatal. Those are
Yeah,
really tough things, but they prepare you for a life that is nobody gets out
yeah.
scot free of
Mhm.
trauma and hardship and challenge. And um but I think that two things I learned back in those days. Number one, I learned that nobody knows everybody's story.
Mhm.
I knew that. I talked to so many people about their private lives that if you were to meet them anywhere else, you wouldn't have any clue what's going on behind those curtains.
Mhm.
That's a powerful realization. But then I also realized when I would work with people who were frankly just didn't want to be there, they were burned out. And I remember saying, gosh, life is do us all a favor and quit. Go find another job, right? Do you hear the dog a lot?
I can hear him.
Okay.
Yes.
I have no idea what's happening.
That's all right. You need to go check on him.
Is that okay?
That's
I
totally fine. Nope, I've got an editor.
What the heck? Stop. Stop. That has never happened where she barks continuously, except we're on a podcast.
Right. Look at her little face back there. She's like, "Who, me? Who, me?" Oh my gosh.
Okay.
What kind of dog is she?
She's like a pit mix. She's fairly new to us. She's a rescue. She has a little bit of
Oh.
anxiety. We're learning stuff. I have no
Oh,
idea what
look
that
at you
was.
walking the path with a rescue. We have a rescue as well. We just
They,
adopted one in March from
oh,
Seattle
okay.
Humane Society.
We were about March. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we got little twinsies.
Yes.
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 Oh, so cute. Well, it's you mentioned several things that I feel like are a real challenge, I think, for people to learn, which is one, how to have the hard conversations and
Mhm.
face the things, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
many of us end up needing to do that, needing to
Right.
do that hard work. It is always interesting. I remember, and this was years ago, but I remember, I think it was actually at my sister's funeral,
Mm.
having a conversation with one of my dad's cousins who, at the time they probably would have been in their 50s or 60s. They'd flown up from California and they were mentioning just how much hardship my dad had had in his life
Mm.
and just how in their life they were like, we don't know really one person, maybe aside from parents or grandparents that had passed. And, you know, and that was just in relation to
Yeah.
losing loved ones. But
Yes.
it is interesting how drastically different life can be. I think some people end up facing some of the dark nights much later in
Much.
life than
Yes.
others,
Yep.
right? And some people face it from the beginning. Um,
Yeah.
how do you where do you fit? Like the fact that you jumped into a career where you were helping people through that process, have you always been able to go there?
Yeah, and I was mislabeled. I was labeled correctly, but judged for being sensitive. I
Mm,
was told I was too
yeah.
sensitive, and I felt pretty judged by that. But reality, that's my superpower.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I felt bad about it for a long time because I was really sensitive.
Mm,
But I've always been a champion of the downtrodden, if you would, like
mm,
that's not fair. I remember I left my church of origin over my dissatisfaction with the way that church viewed others,
yeah.
other
Yep.
than white and middle class or straight, and those were before the world was doing that on a bigger scale,
Yes.
and I didn't even have language around it, but I knew it was out of alignment with who I was.
Mhm.
um then I chose to teach sexuality education, which was very much, my family was like, what, we don't even know what to what. So, and then I'm working in HIV, and then I had my kids, and that my kids both turned out to have special needs. So I had
Mm,
two special needs children who had two very different kinds of special needs.
mm,
So navigating those years, Heather, I'll just be straight up and honest with you. I was like, do I have a big old X on my head? Do I have a because I was
mm.
watching my friends and colleagues not have, to my perception, as many of the hard challenges that I was having right in those main years when I was divorced. My husband left me, divorced, two special needs kids, trying to run my own business as a motivational speaker. And I tell everybody, all I really wanted to do was eat Oreos,
Right.
but I was scrambling, and I had had a bit of burnout before I had my kids, and then through those 10 plus years of doing the entrepreneurial thing at the same time, when my home life was so fracking hard.
Mm,
um Now I'm on the other side of some of that, so I
yeah.
can speak from a little more grounded place, but I
Yeah.
will tell you, those years were grueling. They were
Yeah.
grueling. And now it's when I learned the most. It's what I'm here now in my work. I get it. And I even knew back then that this was teaching me something,
Mhm.
but that didn't that didn't make it
No.
in the moment. No,
Right, right.
it didn't.
How, I think about the journey of parenting and I realize like it can be tough for a lot of parents.
Mhm.
And I've also come to realize there is a distinct difference between children, spending time with other families. Like
Yes.
you see kids where you're like, I get that their days might be hard sometimes, but there is a difference between certain children. And then you add special needs or high
Yep.
needs on top of that. How did you make it through? How did you make it
Well,
through?
um, one of my um I was getting ready to call it a gift. One of the things I am pretty good at is, if I need it, I go figure it out.
Hmm.
And so I surrounded myself with a few people, and I kind of joked, I'm like, if your kid's not sucking on their shirt in class, then we can't be friends. I mean, like, we need the shirt sucking children, and I need parents who are dealing with therapy appointments
Go
and
get it.
other issues. And so I created or allowed or formed or was part of, I won't take full credit of it, but I was instrumental in creating myself a beautiful container
Mm,
where we picked and held each other up, and we talked about the truth, and that's another thing I would say is that I did sort of sugarcoat it to folks who were not quite in my
right.
safety circle, just because
You
that
need a
out of
safety
safety.
circle. That's
Yeah.
right. It's very important.
But when it came to I didn't lie to myself to the extent that I could control that. I
Yeah.
tried to be really clear with myself, like, this sucks and this is hard, or they've got this issue, or I wish it weren't so, but XYZ is true.
Yeah.
And that truth telling. And then this is, I hope it's okay. I'll kind of add this to it. Fast forward, I'm sitting in the home I'm in now with the love of my life, who just popped into my life, apparently. And I'm sitting on my back porch ready to come back into coaching because I had taken a bit of sabbatical. It was so hard.
Mm.
And I went, how in the hell did I get here in this beautiful home with this beautiful love, with this beautiful, and I'm like, how did I create that when most of my time was spent swirling in fear and negativity and being chased by unhappy children? And I realized all along the way, Heather, I really literally reverse engineered this in my head. All along the way, there was some part of me that was crafting the life I wanted in my imagination. And I wouldn't have told you that I was doing that at the time. I would have said, yeah, I was rolling my eyes while I would make a vision board, or I'd scrape together, $50 to go to a spiritual retreat. And all of it seemed so namby-pamby and, throwing silly little things, doing silly little things just to make myself feel better in the moment. I'm here to tell you, I think it's what changed my life. Does that make sense, Heather?
Yeah, and I'm curious, like, even what you said before this about your ability to be honest with yourself, do you think that's what allowed you to watch for those things that seemed like a momentary, either like in the moment little lifesaver or retreat or getaway or whatever, right? Whatever the experience was.
Absolutely. Because I would, in snotty nosed tears or in some kind of fit, over a cup of coffee in the morning, crying over breakfast after I'd had a horrible night. And then I would say, but what I really need is this, and then I would see it and it would show up. So it wasn't linear. It wasn't all pretty and packaged in bows. And it wasn't always romantic that I just, I know I want this, and it showed up and there was the money.
Right.
There was sort of something on an intuitive level that I knew, and I don't know if it was hope. I don't know if it was something divine that just was a blessing. I don't know. And I don't even really need to know. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
What I think is interesting is that, I think it can be really hard in those moments where we're really facing the struggle to actually even see the ways that little lifelines are showing up. How do you think that you were able to see those?
Because I was always asking myself, what do I want? I was always asking myself, and it would often start with, I don't want this. This thing I'm having right here. I don't want this, But I told, in my introduction, I call myself a question asker because I'm always going, but what do I want? And most of the time I would say, I don't know, but I know it's not this. And then I'd go, but okay, what I do want is fill in the blank. I want to laugh more. I want, and I say, I want a man who adores me. I want a man who adores me as witty and blah, 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 and made this whole long list. And I got all of that. I did put that he would be 6'4". He is 5'8". That's the one. He is shorter than me. The god and the goddess has a sense of humor. I don't know, but I would say those things. And I didn't even really say them in some woo-woo way that I knew they were coming. I was just sort of, but as I'm working in now, and I'm bringing this into my work now, and I'm saying to folks, when they're in the throes of despair, take 1% of your time and play it in your head what you want instead. 1% more, 2% more, find some way to have it down. I remember I had a client years and years and years ago. She said, when I have XYZ amount of business success, she was a business woman. She said, I'm going to buy this whole set of Italian glassware. And I'm like, no, buy one now. Buy one now, and so that, and I don't always walk this talk, Heather. Don't don't pretend I got this down. But that's the key, right? Is knowing what you want. And of course, I've figured out later, then you kind of really have to know why you want it,
Mm,
and then there's the courage to actually declare it. All that
yeah.
came over time.
Well, that's the piece that I when I heard you say that I'd actually say, like, that in my own experience has been key. The willingness to say it
Yes.
out loud, write it down, say it to your friend, your sister, whatever. I think that when we stop short of that, we're not really
Yeah,
fully owning the
we're
thing
not.
or the desire. Yeah.
Well, and we're losing out on the fuel. I would say, okay, you know what you want, then the why is kind of like the firewood. Why do you
Mm.
want it? But the fuel is to declare it to the world. Like I say, to unapologetically declare it. And that's kind of like that little
Mm.
blower of air. You know, it's still in there if you don't tell anybody, but it ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And you need other, like in business or in dating or in parenting, we need the tribe of little tentacles all over the world to help us. And if we
Oh,
don't tell what we need, nobody can work on our behalf.
isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So the sharing is literally helps it come to us because
Yeah.
people can bring it to us.
I
And
love
then
that.
and that's been my experience over and over and over again. And then of course, the more you believe, the more you say it, you live into it. You live into
Mhm.
it. And all those things like acting, what are they? I can't even think of them, but I'm going blank, but act and it'll show up or whatever those things
Totally.
are. Just
Yep.
there's truth in that. There's truth in that.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
there, as you stand here today, and I'm so glad to hear that you've got some things that have fallen into exactly the
Yeah.
right place for
They have.
you. But is there something that you wish, given that I assume you're probably a person that trusts in divine timing,
Mhm.
but also, is there something that you wish you knew or understood more fully earlier on your path?
Oh, yeah. I think I wish I understood all of what we just talked about,
Mm.
the real breadth of it. And I had senses of it back then, but I wish I really knew the power. My friend would say we would head out on a garage sale and she'd say, okay, I'm going to find a size 7 boys jeans and a tent for 4 and some clipboards. And we'd find it every time. But why we didn't aim for bigger, besides, pecan sandies on sale. I wish I'd really leaned into that's true on whatever level, however big you want.
Mm.
I wish I had, and probably the biggest thing, and I'm sure men will, um, this might resonate with some men, but I think it will really resonate with women. I did a whole lot of insecurities around body and who I
Mm.
am and how do I fit and can I stand up on a stage and do I compare to that other speaker and are they prettier and oh my gosh, video, and that held me back, Heather,
Mm.
so much. And I would just say I don't have, and these are my actual language back then, I'm like, I don't have the internal strength to show up and do that next phase back when
Mm.
video was first becoming popular as a speaker.
Mhm.
And wish I knew now. I mean, I wish I knew then what I knew now,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's also the process of learning.
It is. I was gonna say, I think so many, I certainly know so many women can relate to
Mhm.
what you've just said, right? We're in a culture and society where there's just no denying that we have influences from a very young age around all that stuff.
Yes.
Um, but I just think there are some things you can't learn without just walking through the
Right.
fire.
It's exactly right. It's one of the reasons I try really hard to not give advice to young parents unless they ask,
Mm.
because first of all, you can't hear it anyway. You gotta right now. I do now as now. I do believe you can in business. I think we're wise when we realize that we don't have all the answers, but there's some lessons out there that you just can't fast forward through, and frankly, you
Mhm.
don't want to miss them. It's one of my values with my own kids. I didn't want to shortchange them out of the hard lessons.
Yeah.
Um, but that self confidence that I lacked for reasons that were just societal or even self-imposed. I wish I could have dialed that back a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think so many of us are with you on
yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
It
yeah.
starts young.
And I'm almost 60 and it's still there,
Mhm.
but I've got tools
Right,
now,
right.
you know,
Yep.
and I can pretty soon I'll call myself a crone and I'll just own it. I'll just own it. Yeah.
Right. Well, each new decade, I think there comes like an additional layer of freedom around certain
Yes,
things, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I remember sitting in an audience one time and it was a panel of women up on stage. It was actually hosted by the Riveter, which is a local uh co-working company that was built by a local founder here. And anyways, I've watched their journey and they hosted tons of local events. And so they were talking with other female founders. And I remember one of the women said, if you think you're out of F's to give in your 40s, just wait till your 50s and 60s.
I know. It's really true, Heather. It's really true. And it's so freeing. But all of that is accessible to us earlier. It's actually one of the things I
Yes.
really love in what I see in the younger folks that don't have the baggage, or at least don't appear. They may have different baggage, but they don't have some of the
Mhm.
same baggage that I did. It makes me very hopeful. It makes me very
Right. Well, I think, each generation is here to heal something. And I feel like our generation is really learning about trauma, about the journey in the body, about healing from generational issues and things. And I agree, some of the younger generations I love. Even like, and there's a lot of talk, and I hear people put down millennials, and it makes me sad. And
oh, yeah.
because I'm like, I think they're brilliant. They're not willing to tolerate things
Yes,
that the rest of us just thought we had to tolerate. You
exactly.
know, they make more mindful choices when it comes to what they consume. They are just doing things differently. And I hope they do, and I hope they continue to, and I hope that other generations continue to shake it up, because I feel like so much needs changing.
Oh my gosh. And I love the way you said that. In fact, you made it go down another layer for me. It's like, yes, I tolerated a lot. I was told I had to tolerate a lot.
Mhm.
I'm great at tolerating. And that's not something to brag about. I mean, it has its
Mm-mm.
place. It has its place in moments, but yeah, that sense of it can be better.
Yeah.
And so who, our listeners, I think, as you listen to this, is that if you're more in my age, in the 50s, I don't know, are you in your 30s or 40s? Are you in your
I'm in my
40s?
40s. Yeah.
40s.
Yep.
Wherever you are, you're on that progression, but
Mm.
that we can take that lesson is that if we're sitting and feeling the heaviness of toleration, that's something to look at. A million
Yes.
years ago, one of the very first coaches was Cheryl Richardson, and she was on Oprah a million years ago. She wrote one of the first coaching books, and she had an activity. She said, write down 10 things you're tolerating. I still have the list, Heather. I wrote down 89 things. 89 things
First
from,
of all, I love that your number is 89. That's
I
one that I
know.
use like randomly, like, to exaggerate.
Yeah.
89, blah, blah, blah. 89, this. And yeah, it's actually your
But I had
number.
89 things, from the button had fallen off my favorite pants to I needed to build a website to I can't find my blah, 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 blah papers. But this long list, and of course that we're using toleration in two different ways, but there was just sense of burden,
Yeah.
of putting up with. And
Mhm.
I think that is something I'd love all of us to,
Mm,
and I come back to my own work. That's what I'm trying to help people understand. They don't have to just live in me, or they don't have to live in crappy. I'll say often you want more happy, less crappy. And that really means you've got to just not tolerate it
One of the
anymore.
things I love you for, Cheri, is your use of words. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Oh,
More happy, less crappy. That is
yes.
so perfect.
But I think you're right. I've loved that word. Just stop tolerating the
Yeah.
BS.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Well, it's like, and you really can look in every area of your life and see those things. Like, what am I tolerating around my house? What am I
Yeah,
tolerating in my relationship? What am I tolerating at work with my clients or
yep,
coworkers or wherever you are that I shouldn't be tolerating?
absolutely. And sometimes I call those energy leaks because they're little things you can actually fix. And then some of those are bigger issues around the way you've related and setting up patterns, and those are harder to
Yes.
solve. But if you're having to step over a pile of shoes every time you come in the house and you want to wring your children's necks, you can fix that. You know, I remember I kept frustrating with that parent group I was telling you about. I'd come in, I'd say, "Oh, he did it again. He squirted all of my shaving cream out the window of the shower." And then I'd come in the next week, I'm like, he squirted all the shaving cream out the window. And after about the third time, my friends are like, well, why do you keep putting the can of shaving cream in the shower? I went, oh, duh. So, yeah,
Right?
this is why you need friends. This is why you need friends.
Yes. Well, and if you ever wonder what maybe should be put away around your house, just get a dog,
Just
right?
get a dog. There
Just
you
get a
go.
dog, like, "Oh, should recycling actually go here? No, no, it
No,
shouldn't. Should our shoes go here? No, they shouldn't."
that's beautiful. That's a great example. But but that frustration I would have and realizing, no, I can fix some of those things.
Mm,
And
yep.
then some you can't fix, and you truly have to learn how to tolerate and live through it.
Mm,
But most can be
mm, right.
fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In all this work, because there's just so much in life that we get to uncover and look under that
Mhm.
rock and under that rock, right? So many things. What do you love most about what you do?
Oh gosh, so many answers came to my head. One is, I love it when I am helpful in having someone's light go on.
Mm,
And what I mean is, you can see, and I know you've witnessed this, most everybody can, when all of a sudden something clicks and they go, oh, and they've gotten an insight, an awareness. And I'm a pretty good synthesizers of other people's brilliance. So I read all those books and I pull it out and I pop some wisdom on somebody. I didn't come up with it. But when I can facilitate that, and then they go, oh, I now am able to do this thing, or I had this hard conversation, or I
mm.
was able to shift that, that is like catnip to me. That is,
I want more. Give me more. Give me more, right?
yeah, well,
Mm,
I know that's, I know for me, that's how I'm relatively sane. It's from my own light bulb moments. And
mm,
so when I know that other people can put the pieces together, they're healing in some way.
mm.
And we want a world full of healing people.
Yes, we do.
Mhm.
Ugh, underscore that one. We want a
Yeah.
world full of healing people.
Hmm.
Yes.
And I don't think they have to be healed.
No, it's a process, right?
Yeah.
It's not a switch. It's not a switch.
Right.
It's a
Right.
process. We
Right.
wish it was a switch, right?
Don't we? Yeah. Don't trust it. If somebody tells you they have the switch, run away.
Right. Oh my gosh, I feel like we could go on and on. I've loved this.
Hmm.
Cheri, where, just out of respect for your time and the listeners' time, where do you like for people to connect with you online for folks that are like, you know what? I think I've got some tolerations I need to deal with,
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
something
sure.
else where I need to move from crappy to happy in this
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
Where would you
I,
direct them to?
I would direct them first to my website, sherryhoneycutt.com. And it's spelled, it's, if you're seeing in the show notes, Cheri with a C and Honeycutt. And I've got a couple of giveaways there, a few things that you might find helpful, how to set goals, how to get unstuck.
Mhm.
I'm also on Facebook, but I love somebody to drop me an email. Give me a phone call. I
Oh,
mean, I'm really accessible. I on my website, you can set up a time just for us to have a conversation.
mm,
And I'm really cool with that. I don't see every conversation as, oh, we're going to turn this into, it could just be, hey, I heard you on the podcast. Let's chat.
love that. Well, we will share your contact
Mhm.
information, your email, your website, your 2 giveaways, right? You've got the 90-day absolute yes list, a tool to help you set inspired and doable 90-day goals. I love that. As well as Get Unstuck, a robust set of questions to ask yourself when you're stuck and don't know what to do. Folks, you can find those at the show notes page, which is legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast, along with Cheri's other links. We'll link to your social media and stuff. Cheri, such a joy to
Oh
be
my
with
gosh,
you
Heather.
here today. I love that we finally were able to connect.
So much
What
fun.
what final thoughts or takeaway would you like to leave the audience with?
I want to leave you with this, is that at least to where I sit, we don't accidentally create the life we've always wanted. It just doesn't happen by accident. It only happens when we live with intention
Mm,
and taking responsibility for creating the life we want. And it's not as hard as it sounds, but you do have to show up.
yeah,
So
you do
that's
have to
what I
show
would
up.
say.
I
Mhm.
love it. Cheri, I adore you. I'm so
I
grateful
gotcha.
to know you. I hope that we cross paths in person
In
again one of these
person, let's
days.
do it.
It would be lovely. Thank you for
Yes.
being here.
You're welcome, Heather. Thank you.